Hello and welcome to Grouchy Geeks episode 26. My name's Steve, my co-host is Scott.
Hello.
This episode we've got some news and reviews, and then for our main feature we're going to talk about some of the new season's TV that's coming later this year and what we think about some of the shows that have been picked up and some of the ones that have been cancelled as well, unfortunately. So we'll come on to that. So do you want to kick us off with some news?
Yeah, sure. So there doesn't seem to be a huge amount out there, although I've watched some quite cool things lately. But one of the things that I was kind of aware was out there, but I hadn't been paying very much attention to, there's been the first, as far as I know, the first set pictures released, which is of the Watchmen TV series. I don't know if you've heard much about this or you've seen the pictures or anything like that.
I knew they're working on it, but I haven't seen any any pictures of the TV show.
Yeah, it's kind of, again, it was sort of something that, you hear about and then these things disappear while they go off and actually start producing them. And they're the first set pics, but they're not, I don't think they're official ones. Basically what happens is, somebody, because they're filming in a city, lived in the area, they took a bunch of photos. So it's it's pictures of cars where the American flag is different. And it looks like, possibly slight spoilers, it looks like it's set after the graphic novel or after the movie, okay. Because there's pictures of newspapers that in newsstands that refer to things at the end of the graphic novel and the movie. Pictures of, so it's interesting. So there's like icons on some of the street pictures of like an octopus, which implies that actually they're kind of doing a sequel to the comic rather than a sequel to the movie, because that was a slight difference between the two endings. But it looks, there's not much to look at, but it looks cool. But it's kind of, it was more me registering my surprise of, oh, that's an actual thing that's happening now.
There's so much, I was talking to someone last night and saying, quite often there's so much TV now that you're trying to struggle to keep up with things. Mm-hmm. It's got to the point where someone says, are you watching this? And I go, I've not even heard of that.
Yeah.
There's so much, and then there's all this new stuff we're going to talk about as well, and other things beyond that. So this is something I'm going to try and keep on my radar for when it comes out, probably next year, but we'll see what it's like.
Yeah, cool.
Bit of TV news actually as well to start from me. Obviously next year we get the final season of Game of Thrones, and they want more because it's probably the biggest TV show in, 10 or 15 years or something. So the people who own the rights have been hiring lots and lots of people to work on spin-offs, prequels, sequels, all sorts of things. And I think there were 5 in development.
Wow, that's
at one
crazy.
point. Yeah. So one of them, so far, I suspect there'll be others, has been greenlit. And it's a prequel. It'll be from HBO as well. And it's from Jane Goldman, who's obviously worked on lots of things like, Kick-Ass, Stardust, all that kind of stuff. And it's going to be set thousands of years before the events of the TV show.
Oh, interesting. So it's nice that they're kind of distancing themselves from it a little bit, like, set in the same universe, but, you're giving yourself that sort of gap in order to play around with things a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's going to go quite far back, and you'll still have familiar names, so you might hear the name Stark, and you might hear all of that sort of thing, and I think it's going to look into the origins of the White Walkers and other mysteries that they're hinting at, but it's going to be in what they've called the Age of Heroes from the story. That's all part of the books that Martin's planned and other things that he's other documents and things that he's sent out there. So it's going to be interesting because there'll obviously be no familiar characters, but you might hear familiar names, and it might refer to certain things that people have talked about in the current show in terms of myth. But it's not going to have that thing where, where they do a prequel, or people have accused one of the problems with the new Han Solo film is they're constantly trying to connect the dots with everything. Like, oh, that's important, so therefore we have to connect it and somehow make it connected to the new stuff that's come out. And it's just like, can it not just be its own thing? So I'm hoping with this being so far in the past, they won't do that. They'll just have the odd nod, but it will be a completely separate entity.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I'll be honest, I'm so far behind Game of Thrones now that I'm never ever going to catch up. But maybe this is the opportunity for me to start afresh with it.
Well, yeah. It's next year's the final season, so you should be able to catch up with that. Yeah,
that's true. So this is not really news, but this is something that I've started watching after a recommendation on our WhatsApp group from the man himself, Dave Monteith. He said his new favourite show is The Ministry of Time, which is on Netflix. And I thought, I should check it out. And so I tried to find it and I couldn't find it. And it turns out that it's really called El Ministerio de Tiempo, because this is actually it's a Netflix show, but it's filmed in Spain, and it's a Spanish show. So it's about a bunch of people that have been plucked out from time from various bits in Spanish history, and they're kind of a team of people that go to various points in Spanish history to save the future from evil time travelers that are attempting to do the same thing and change the future to their ends. So I've only seen the first couple of episodes. I have to admit that I'm such an intensely shallow person that I was almost put off by the fact that it was subtitled, and I'd have to read and pay attention. But it's really worth a watch. It's a really, really good show. It's really entertaining. It's different, not just because it's in Spanish, but that it kind of gives you a different feel to if it was like an American show or something like that. And without, I've no idea how Dave found it, but without a personal recommendation, it would be really, really difficult to find. So that's why I thought I'd bring it up and say that it's worth looking at. It's a really good show.
Okay, that's one to watch out for. I saw that you mentioned it, and I thought, yeah, I must get to it at some point, but there's so much stuff. Another bit of TV news tying into comics. Later this month, we've got the second season of Luke Cage starting, and the Marvel TV show Inhumans was cancelled. It got the first season, but I don't even got a full first season, but it was cut basically before because it was just not well received at all. But after Luke Cage season 2, we think we're getting Daredevil season 3, and then you'll get more Iron Fist, but they're saying don't expect another Defenders series because that was a real special one-off thing, and
interesting.
Yeah, trying to fit it in with all of the others is quite difficult. And if they do it again, it has to be for a good reason. They won't just do it on the rota, which I think makes sense because you don't want them every year they get together and what's this year's mission? We have to rescue that cat. Okay, that takes all 4 of us. Hooray! And it's no, just so they're built up to something which worked. And then but I don't know. They're saying they're not planning it right now, but you never know, is what the quote says. And I think see where the other shows go in the next few years, and if they start planting seeds, perhaps we might get something further down the line. But yeah, I'd rather they wait than try and just put something out every year just to try and get them all together.
Yeah, sure. It starts to become like the A-Team, right? Where every episode they have to break Murdoch out of the asylum.
It's true. It is. It's oh God, again. Really?
Yeah.
Please stop it, Murdoch.
So I've got amazing news for everybody.
Okay.
Everybody's going to be absolutely incredibly excited about this. And I think the rumour is out that after an amazing cameo appearance in Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think everybody will agree that was the highlight of the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, it looks like we could be getting, at long last, a Howard the Duck reboot.
Oh, God, really?
Yeah, it sounds like it. This could be happening. This could be an actual thing.
What have they said?
So it's being so the headline is James Gunn's dreams could come true. So at the moment it's at the pitching stage of them doing a Howard the Duck reboot, but I for one am feeling very positive about it already at this early stage.
Did you like the original one? Because I really didn't. I thought it was quite dull.
I'll be honest. Part of this is me just jesting, but I found it immensely funny that they're even considering it. So those of you that didn't grow up in the 80s, I can pretty much guarantee have never heard of this movie. It's based on a comic. It was produced by George Lucas, but I don't think directed by George Lucas. But he was the mastermind behind it. And it was about this duck from another dimension that could talk and walk around that came to the planet Earth and just basically went on an adventure. So it stars Leah Thompson as, bizarrely, his love interest, which is a little bit disturbing in places.
Right.
But the thing that makes it really weird is the fact that it's quite adult. Like, there's lots of swearing in it and sex jokes, and he's looking at like duck porn at the beginning of it, and it's just pitched in a very weird area that you've got this talking duck, but it's not. It's aimed at an adult audience, and it basically failed on pretty much every conceivable level that you can think of a movie failing on. But there was this sort of comedic. He was in one of the collector's cages, wasn't he? I think. Just as sort of like a little Howard Duck reference and joke, but it looks like he could be coming back in his own movie.
Oh dear. Yeah, well, that isn't one I'll be queuing up to see. That's for sure. It just sounds dull. Anyway, so Marvel and DC are having a bit of a shake-up of things at the moment. Obviously, Axel Alonso stepped down as editor-in-chief, and C.B. Cebulski came in at Marvel, and he's doing like a bit of a change, a line-wide reboot, and all sorts of things going on. Over the other side of the street, DC have had some recent changes. So the president of DC Comics, Diane Nelson, she's left Warner Brothers to go and do something else. We're not sure what, but she's stepped down. And Jeff Johns, who has been one of the top guys there. But he started out as a comic book writer, then he became sort of in charge of things. Green Lantern, he helped reboot that and brought it forward and did several years on that and introduced so much new material. Then he got promoted, and he got promoted again to Chief Creative Officer. He's now stepping down from that role, so to focus more on the creative side. So I guess he's been involved in films, comics, animated, and everything else in between. And he wants to go back to doing more writing comics and doing other stuff. So he's launching a new imprint for DC. So he's still working for DC, but I think he's just going away from the business side. Yeah. So he's going to be doing a new DC imprint called The Killing Zone. He's got a slate of new books coming out. He's doing a mini-series on something else. He's doing so he loves the characters and he loves the world, so he's not going anywhere. But he's quite a senior figure. That's another one that's going back to sort of basics, as it were. So there's definitely some change. And then you've got Brian Bendis, who's coming in from being at Marvel for 18 years, and he's now coming to DC and writing Superman. And I suspect he'll be at DC for the next 10, 15 plus years. So it's a very interesting time if you do read comics from the big two and all of these higher up changes to see what's going to be coming out.
So this is a question for you. Do you read much from the big two these days? Yeah,
so I've gone to trade on most of the big Marvel and DC ones. If it's a mini-series or something that's from Marvel DC, I might read the first couple digitally and then switch to the trade. But if it's something like Spider-Man, I know there's always going to be a Spider-Man book, so I don't worry so much about buying the singles. But if it's an image book or something, I will go single issues. So yeah, I'm reading a few books at Marvel and a few books at DC. Green Lantern. What else? I'd have to look at my shelf to jog my memory. But Marvel, I'm reading. Let's have a look. Some of the old Bendis ones, actually. So I'm reading the Jessica Jones book, which is just finished. Infamous Iron Man, which is a Bendis one. But I think this reboot, in a way, well, this kind of line-wide reset, is going to bring in some interesting ideas, predominantly at Marvel, because C.B. Cebulski is the man in charge, and he's obviously got a very different approach.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. So around a year ago, I said I'd got a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, and I'd kind of become addicted to it. And it was I'd just hit the renewal point, and I decided to not renew, just because I was just having trouble finding the time, to be honest. But I have to, again, this is just a sign of age and being a grouchy old geek, but I much enjoyed reading the older stuff than the later stuff. The later stuff just didn't seem to be able to kind of capture that magic for me a little bit. So maybe a change of pace is something that's going to benefit everybody.
I think so. A big reshuffle, and what's good for one side is good for the other, because it forces them both to up their game, really. That's always a good thing.
Sure.
Right. Do you have any more news? I've only got one more thing.
I really have one thing to say. It's not a piece of news, but it is basically go and watch Cloak and Dagger, because it's really good.
Is that on Amazon?
It's on Netflix.
Oh, Netflix. Okay.
Is it?
No.
Wait.
You've got both, actually, so it's probably...
Yeah, I know. Get me right. I do
Amazon.
well.
I think it's Amazon.
Yeah, all of a sudden, I think you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard it's very, very good. So I will have to try and watch that. My last bit of news is to do with Bad Robot.
Okay.
So this is J.J. Abrams' production company, who's done lots and lots of films. You'll recognise it. You would have seen it from the credits. So lots of stuff, from the Star Wars to the Star Trek films. So Bad Robot has announced that they're expanding into the video games industry.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's going to be called Bad Robot Games, and it's partnering with a Chinese conglomerate to form this new division to develop original games. And Warner Brothers is signed on as a minority investor, and they're going to work with, they're talking about PC, mobile, and console platform games.
Interesting. Is it going to be like spin-offs of the Bad Robot movies? Do you know?
No.
Or is it completely original stuff? That's
original, from what I can tell. Original game, be controlled and operated by Abrams to develop original games. Yeah.
Wow, that is really interesting. I don't have much more to say than that's really interesting. Because I always imagined that basically Bad Robot was just J.J. Abrams, if you know what I mean. Like, you'll have a team of people working for him.
Yeah.
But basically that's just his company, under which, if you want J.J. Abrams to come and produce your film, then it just is done under the banner of Bad Robot. I didn't realise there was kind of much more than J.J. Abrams involved in that, but it sounds like video games aren't cheap to produce. But it's interesting that they've decided to go down that route. So I'm guessing that these are going to be quite... because you get all sorts of games, right? You get everything from Candy Crush all the way to something like The Last of Us. But I'm guessing this is going to be at The Last of Us end of the spectrum, where these things are going to be sort of very story driven and sort of plot heavy with great characters and stuff like that. It's really interesting. I guess he's just a guy that's passionate about games and wants to start doing stuff in that area.
Well, we know that some games, when they launch, make more money than films.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even though a game costs £40 or £50, the numbers they sell in generates the money, and it just blows some films out of the water. So it says that they're going to develop both indie-sized and large-scale projects for different platforms. So it obviously it's a passion of his, and it's something that he wanted to get into, and he's got the right partners, and now it's going to go forward. But we don't know when it's going to take off, and it's obviously too early for any news about any games, but diversifying again into games. So watch this space, really.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's hard to know what to make of it, other than just it's a really fascinating, strange decision to make.
Yeah. I realise we haven't really talked much about comics. We kind of inadvertently talked about comics. Are you reading any at the moment, or you haven't got the time?
I'm struggling to at the moment. I must admit, I need to get back into doing that sort of thing. It's something that I wish I was doing, and I miss doing it. But I tend to get up so early in the morning now to go to work, and then by the time I get home and I've eaten, and I'll be honest, the things that I tend to favour doing nowadays in the spare time that I have is either watching TV shows or playing computer games. That seems to me kind of where I want to naturally focus my energy, in part, I think, because these things are quite easy to sort of relax on and zone out of, and they don't ask as much of you as things like comics and books. But I'm not saying that I'm happy with that situation, but that's just kind of where mentally I am at the moment. But I'm guessing that you're still a voracious. Let's put it this way: you write books faster than I read books. So, let's just get this, a sense of proportion here about things. But I'm guessing that you're still, a voracious reader of both novels and comics.
My capacity for reading comics has diminished recently. I'd say the last couple of years it's decreased. Maybe it's just because I've been busier. But there again, I'll get a stack of trades and I'll gradually work my way through them, whereas before I'd burn through them a lot more quickly and buy a lot more. So at the moment on my pile, so I'm currently reading the new Lazarus trade, but I've got, if I look at my pile to read, I've got another Infamous Iron Man one, I've got a Jessica Jones one to read, I've got a Deadly Class one to read, and a Revolver one, which is a Matt Kint graphic novel. So I've got a stack of 5 or 6 sat there ready to go. But I would have got through those in, a couple of months and begun to go and get something else. I mean, I do have a local comic shop now. There's one in my town, and then there is one in Birmingham as well. But I don't tend to go in as often now. I mean, I am reading Strangers in Paradise month to month because that's to support that. Because if you don't, that might actually disappear and go away. So I am reading that digitally. And that's the new Strangers in Paradise that's come back for limited, I think it's 12-issue series, celebrating the 25th anniversary since it first came out. So it's a new story, and I'm reading it, obviously, through Comixology. And I'll probably double dip as well and obviously get the trade or the collection when it's finished. So, but that's really, really good. Really enjoying that again.
I mean, I think actually, if I think about this a little bit more, that actually this is something that I've kind of been doing all my life. Like I started out, being a voracious comic reader, particularly of 2000 AD, and then I went away for a few years, and then I got back into reading absolutely tons and tons of DC, and then I went away for a few years, and then it was when I came back to comics that we met, and then started doing Comic Book Outsiders, kind of specifically because of that. To do this show about somebody that knows a lot about comics versus somebody that's just kind of coming back into comics, and then I've done that for a fair few years, and now I'm kind of in the stage where that's waned quite a lot. So I would still, despite all of the evidence, I still feel like I'm a comics fan.
Yeah.
I'm still passionate about the medium, but kind of that passion is mostly in reading comics news. Like I'll read comics news rather than read comics at the moment. I still kind of find the industry fascinating and what's going on with it, and I want to kind of keep on top of it. And I'm sure, I have the confidence that excitement and that enthusiasm will get rekindled in me. But just at the moment, I'm kind of in the trough of that cycle that I seem to have gone through, kind of my whole life, really.
Fair enough. Maybe you'll come back round next year, and I'll introduce you some good comics.
You need to set me homework, and that's what you need to do.
And I'm still reading books, obviously. I never stopped. I never stopped reading. I've had a book in my hand always since I was about 8, I think. So, There you go. What book am I on this year? I'm on, I think, book 13. See, because
that's just the ones that he's writing, folks.
You see, that's quite slow compared to some. My target this year was to read 15, and we're in June now, and I'm on 12. I know some people who read 50 books a year, so if I can get to 15 or 20 books this year, I'll be happy. But we'll see.
And it's interesting, actually, that so something that is kind of a dramatic change for me is what I am reading very, very slowly has changed quite a lot. So it used to be that I would read only novels, and I would read exclusively sci-fi novels, almost without exception. But a little bit of fantasy, peppered in there here and there, but almost exclusively sci-fi novels. And actually, the stuff that I'm reading at the moment is factual stuff. So if I across what I'm reading, so sort of slightly bizarrely, I'm reading The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which he got the Nobel Prize for Literature for. But this is a 3-volume treatise on the Russian Gulag system that he was a prisoner of from the 1950s to up until the 1950s they ran for. And that's something I would have never have picked up, a few years ago. So that's, my comic tastes haven't really changed, even though I'm sort of waning. But the stuff that I'm reading is very different from the sort of stuff that I used to read. And that feels quite bizarre that my appetite has changed that much for books.
Well, I read. So I used to exclusively read fantasy, and that was it. That was the only thing I would read. And I've obviously widened what I read now. I mean, so earlier this year I read the first part of Obama's biography, which was fascinating, on my pile to read. So the next book I really want to read is also a non-fiction one, and it's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker.
I've heard this recommended. I haven't read it, but I've heard it recommended from multiple people.
Yes, it's supposed to be absolutely fascinating, and it's about the new science of sleep and dreams. And he's the first. Well, it's a new book about this. I wouldn't say he's the first. He's a new person, and he's a neuroscientist. And it talks about what is sleep, why is it important, what is it for, how can it help you, and why do we need it? And it's all of this kind of stuff. And I saw him on a chat show or something, and he always, whenever he goes on a plane or he's travelling somewhere, he starts chatting to someone. Now, he just tells people, when they ask him what he does, that he trains dolphins. Because the minute he says, "Oh, I'm a scientist and I do this and do with sleep," oh, right, and everyone's got a question, everyone's got a story, everyone's got theories, and it's like, oh, God, it's like being at work, and it just goes on and on. So now people say, "What do you do?" "I train dolphins." "Oh, brilliant, great," and that's it. End of conversation.
He should just carry a copy of the book around with him everywhere, and then what do you do? Just read this.
Here's a tenner.
Read this, and then we'll have a conversation.
Give me a tenner. There you go. That's what I've done. Read that. I'll come back. So I've got that to read, and I've got another fascinating one called A Brief History of Everyone Who Ever Lived.
Nice.
Yeah, it's also to do with genetics and how we're all connected on some level. So there you go. There's our book section of Geeks.
Yeah, very spontaneous, but that went well.
We talk about lots of other stuff. We tend to talk a little bit about what we're up to. So there you go. That's a little bit about some of our other stuff.
Awesome.
Cool.
Right, on to our main feature.
Yes.
Hello, welcome back. So in our main feature, we're going to talk about TV pilots. So these are mainstream network US TV pilots. We've got this massive long list of things that have been gone to pilot, have been picked up for a season, are being shopped around to other people, or just been dropped altogether. And we're going to talk about what are some of the highs and the lows in this list. But before we start to talk about specific shows that caught our eye, I'm interested, Steve, in what you thought kind of the list as a whole. What was your sort of feeling as you were going through this list? And it is a massive list, right?
Yeah. To me, looking at this whole list, I think it's a really safe list. There are very few things in there that made me go, oh, that's really different, or that's really original. There are a couple of things that are based on material, whether it's a book or something else, that makes it a little bit quirky. But it feels like a very safe year, if you know what I mean.
I couldn't agree more. It really made me feel like it all felt a little bit old-fashioned to me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
In the sense that we've got Netflix and Amazon that are willing to take risks on these really sort of niche, quirky things like, JCV, Jean-Claude Van Johnson, and all of the and YouTube with Cobra Kai, which is what we talked about in the last episode, and all of these really off-the-wall, weird niche things that might not appeal to everybody, but the people that they do appeal to, they absolutely, adore them. But this felt like, first of all, it's kind of old-fashioned to have this sort of pilot season, and everything is due to come out at kind of roughly the same time, and it just felt like, I guess because in the US these channels are on everybody's TV and they're the stuff that everybody watches, that in the main they're the most generic, bland, safe kind of a shows. I was actually really quite shocked to see it laid out that starkly in this list. Yeah. And it was a little bit disappointing, to be honest, but it now kind of feels like, I know we've talked about new media versus old media in the past, but this list was probably really brought it home to me that this is now old media. They're doing the safe stuff that they've been doing for the last 30 years, and they probably do it really, really well. But there really wasn't a whole lot of interesting off the wall, quirky stuff there.
No, like the interesting shows for things like Stranger Things or The Expanse that people love get saved. So The Expanse was cancelled, and Amazon liked it so much. The head of Amazon, Jeff, Bezos said,
I don't know how you pronounce it. Well, I jumped in there as if I knew, but
you'll call him Jeff. Our mate Jeff. He watched it and said, "This is really, really good." And he rang up someone and said, "Can we save this? Is it available?" And they said, "Yes." He said, "Right." So it just so bizarre that the really interesting shows, as he said, get saved. When this list, there's a lot of cop dramas, procedurals, hospital dramas, fire, courtroom dramas, and some of them do look interesting. There's the odd thing that's a little bit left of field, but some of the more uncomfortable ones or slightly different ones have been cancelled, and I know why some of them have been cancelled. They won't say that's the reason, but you do know that's why they've been cancelled.
Yeah,
it's true. They can try and pretend, but Anyway, shall we talk about some of the ones? I focused on dramas. I didn't look at the comedies because the really good stuff will drift through to Netflix, and that's where I'll watch it.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I started looking at everything on the list, but I got a little bit tired. So I specifically skipped the comedies as well because. So I think the thing with a comedy is probably more. This is, I guess, true of any TV show or any movie. That actually the execution is way more important than the initial concept.
Yeah.
But a comedy could be brilliant or it could be terrible, and it's more or less independent of the idea. It's how it's how they go about doing it. So that's almost less important to talk about. So yeah, I looked pretty much exclusively at the dramas, and I don't think in terms of the list that I came up with of interesting stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
There's no comedies in there at all.
No.
So should I name the first thing of interest? So in no particular order, apart from the one that I'm most excited about that you've already guessed.
I know what that one is already.
Yeah,
you told me, but I know which one that is already. Go on.
Let's just pretend for the moment you don't.
Okay.
So the first thing that I probably got genuinely excited about on the list There's stuff above the list that I sort of noted, but the first one I probably really wanted to talk about was Magnum PI.
Right, go on.
Which has made it to a series. So one of my favourite shows when I was a kid, starring the brilliant Tom Selleck's moustache.
Yep.
Supported, very ably by Tom Selleck himself. It's basically exactly the same plot. So it's on Hawaii. He's an ex-Navy SEAL. He comes back and he becomes a private investigator. He starts to live with Higgins, who I believe is a woman in the new version of the show.
She is. And
actually, I'm basically just hoping that they can recapture my love of the show originally, because I think it's probably one of my favourite TV shows of all time. And I think there's lots of other shows that I love that if I heard they were remaking them, I would groan and say, no, this isn't going to be for me. Actually, a remake of Magnum kind of makes me quite happy. I'm kind of excited about seeing it.
Well, they've also got, on this list, there's a remake of Cagney and Lacey.
Funny enough, that was also on my list as well.
Which has been cancelled.
Yeah.
It was passed over. It has not been picked up to series. So that's two straight away remakes.
I have a theory about Cagney and Lacey, but we can get on. Let's talk about Magnum first.
Okay.
I'll tell you my theory about Cagney and Lacey.
So I've seen the trailer for Magnum, and it looks okay. I'm not wowed by it, I'll be honest. I don't know. It's like when they remade Hawaii Five-0. I watched the first season or two seasons and thought, yeah, that was okay. And then the third season, I was just like, I'm done. I think it's had 8 seasons, so
yeah.
And I think it's now been cancelled, but I'm not sure. But it just went on and on and on. Pete was still watching it, but I gave up years ago. So my fear is it'll just become very same old, unless they keep moving the story forward. But my gut tells me they won't. They'll just, because it's a network show, it'll just be 22 episodes of the same old shit every year. And I'm just thinking, I don't think I can endure that.
Yeah. We'll see. It might, because Magnum PI was a quirky show. There was the whole, relationship between Higgins and Magnum, and I think there's lots of stuff in there for them to do well, I think. So I'm still sort of holding out that this may be something that I could be excited about. But can I tell you about my Cagney and Lacey theory?
Oh, go on then.
And this is probably completely wrong and way off the mark, but when I read about Cagney and Lacey on the list, and that it not even that it's been cancelled, right, but it hasn't been picked up for a season in the first place, was and please, so everybody listening out there, please be clear. I'm not making a judgment call on this. I'm not saying whether it's good. I'm not saying whether it's bad. I'm just saying this is how it is. That when you look down this list, it's a year where women are the stars of almost all of the shows. Like if you look at, it seemed very apparent to me that if you look at all of the, every single show, almost every single show, I didn't count the ratio, but the vast majority of them have a female star, and there's lots of female stars that are in roles as police detectives or spies or all sorts of things like that. It's definitely this seems to be the year where the female star is very, very prevalent.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I say, I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that seems to be how it is. And then we go to Cagney and Lacey, which was kind of an interesting show in the 80s, that this was a show with 2 female leads that were sort of sassy, streetwise detectives that were pulling guns and chasing people and solving crimes and all that sort of stuff, which was probably a unique concept back in the 80s when it was on, and it was a great show in the 80s. I loved it. But now the idea of having 2 streetwise, sassy female detectives it's no longer something that you can hang a show off, right? Yep. Because all of the other shows are doing that exact same thing. And I think just maybe this is a 30-year-old idea that just doesn't work in the present day, because everybody just realizes that it's not about your gender, it's who you are and what you can do, and the job that you want to do, and anybody can do anything that's sufficiently skilled to do it. And maybe it's just maybe it's just an idea that hasn't aged well, this sort of concept. Whereas before, back when it was on in the 80s, and, Steve's, I'll just tell everybody that Steve's editing this episode, and if you don't put the Cagney and Lacey theme tune somewhere in the show, you'll be very disappointed, because it is a classic theme tune.
Yeah.
But maybe it just doesn't work anymore. Maybe it's just not a special concept anymore. Two New York female detectives.
Well, to tie in with that, LA's Finest, which is previously the untitled Bad Boys spin-off, featuring two sassy women in the lead, starring Gabrielle Union. She was reprising her role from Bad Boys 2 as the same character, with Jessica Alba. That has also been passed over and is now being shopped around.
Yeah.
So it's a more modern version of two cops working together. One's an LAPD detective, one's a DEA agent. Similar-ish, but more modern in that it's spun off from the late 90s films. That's also not really caught on for whatever reason. So as you say, maybe even a newer version, it just doesn't have that X factor, either of those two pilots. So who knows? Right, come on. I think I know what your amazing one-off thing that you absolutely love, that you can't wait to talk about, is. And it's on my list. So, well, if I'm right, so I'm going to mention it.
Yeah, let's just do it
Okay.
then.
So the one I want to talk about is called The Rookie, starring Nathan Fillion. Is it your one?
I mean, that's literally the only thing that stands out, right?
I knew you were going to say this.
Of course it is.
Okay, so this is inspired. We should say what this is. It is inspired by a true story, so loosely. The Rookie stars Nathan Fillion as John Nolan, who's the oldest rookie in the LAPD. So I think in the show he's 40 or 42 when he signs up and goes through training and becomes a beat cop. So he's had a complete change of career, and he's surrounded by all these rookies who are 20 years his junior, and now he's got to prove to everybody, his superior who's on his arse, played by Richard T. Jones, and all of the other rookies, that he can do it and he can actually make it. So it looks interesting that Fillion's playing someone who's actually closer to his own age, because I think he's 45 now, I think. But I'll quickly Google it. But come on, tell me why you're looking forward to this then. So,
I mean, let's be honest, I would watch anything with Nathan Fillion on it anyway. But actually the idea of it almost seems to me like the perfect piece of cast. It's a perfect marriage of exactly the right casting to exactly the right concept. Yeah. This idea that, he's somebody that's had this sort of comfortable, very middle-class life in a rural area, and then decides that he wants to fulfill his dream to be, a cop in Los Angeles, and he becomes a rookie, and, he's surrounded by, he's working with guys at the same level of him that's 20 years younger than him, but his boss is probably also older but younger than him, and the kind of like almost, I'm imagining almost sort of like Rick Castle in a way, because it kind of feels like Rick Castle. There was elements of that, like him, this sort of wish fulfillment about working with the cops and things. But it seems to me by far and away the most interesting show in the entire list. Partly because of the casting, partly because I can kind of see. Again, I'm not saying that I think it's going to be the same show as Castle, but it kind of, you can sort of see it having that sort of a feel to it. Yeah, I just think it was the one thing that was like, that's the show for me on this entire list.
There is a show on the list that is Castle, sort of, and it's been picked up for a series. I'm not kidding. So it's a little bit of a twist based from Castle, but it is the same show. It's called Take Two, and it stars a character who was the former star of a hit cop show. So the actress in this fake TV show she was in the show, but then she goes into rehab and has a massive bender. So when she comes out, she's trying to restart her career. So she starts shadowing a PI as research for a potential role where she's going to play a PI in the future. So basically you've got a PI and an actress going around doing stuff together, where before you had a writer and a cop going around doing stuff together. It's if you watch the trailer, it's very, very similar. She keeps leaning on stuff from her cop, in inverted commas, experience of the show to help solve the crimes and things, because she had over 200 episodes of playing this cop, so she knows how to be a detective, but not really. And it's been picked up for a series already.
Yeah, it was interesting that one of the executive producers also worked on Castle. Yeah. That's by the by. That's just purely a coincidence.
Coincidence. Totally coincidence. Carry on.
Okay, so this is a weird thing for me to kind of highlight, because it's a remake of a show. Actually, this is kind of a comedy, but it's a remake of a show that I've never seen, but is kind of in my cultural consciousness, a little bit like Gilligan's Island. I've never seen Gilligan's Island, but they mention it on so many other TV shows that I'm kind of aware of it being there in the background. And this is a show that's been passed over, so this is sort of a cancelled one, but I still thought it was kind of interesting that it's one of the very few. And again, sort of going back to Netflix and Amazon and stuff, Netflix, dripping with superhero shows. We talked about that in the news section, that this is an attempt to do a superhero show, but has got passed over, which is The Greatest American Hero.
Right, I didn't look at this one. Go on.
Okay, so it's I'm just going to read this. Inspired by the 1980s TV show, a 30-year-old woman who loves tequila and karaoke has spent her life searching and failing to find meaning. An inexplicable event occurs that will change the course of Mira's life forever. She's entrusted with a super suit to protect the planet. Mira may have finally found purpose, but the world has never been in more unreliable hands. And it sounds like kind of an interesting concept. And like I say, it's based on a well-known show from the 80s, even though I've not seen that well-known show from the 80s. But it was interesting that I, as far as I can recall, this is almost the only superhero show in that list. And Netflix has got superhero shows coming out of its ears.
Yes.
And this is something that the mainstream networks, despite knowing that the success that Netflix is having with those sorts of shows, have said, no, this one isn't really for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe they just feel like they can't compete. But then you've got, I was going to say, the CW. They've got so many superhero shows. They've got that sewn up as well. Between, let's see, Flash, Arrow, Supergirl, Legends, Black Lightning. You've got, what else? There's a whole bunch. Marvel have got Cloak and Dagger, Runaways, Legion. There's, I'm sure I've forgotten some as well. That just shows how many there are at the moment. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, I mean, again, they did the pilot. It might just have been rubbish. I might be reading just way too much into it, so you never quite know, do you? But it did seem interesting that actually just where they're targeting these shows is very different from where I see the main successes being on these other things like Netflix. I watch almost exclusively now.
Yeah. One I was going to mention that has been passed over, sadly, which is Gone Baby Gone. So, did you ever see the film?
I did, yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Really, really good kind of low-level crime film in a way about two PIs that aren't the best, but they kind of bumble along. And it's based upon the novel by Dennis Lehane. So this was a TV series featuring the two PIs, and sadly, it's not been picked up because you would have got to see Patrick and Angie again doing other things. But it's almost like a low-key crime or PI show set in working-class Boston. And I do wonder if some of the reasons it's passed over is to do with the kind of class thing. Like, does the majority want to watch a show set in Boston with the really strong accents? Is that something that people would be put off by? Is it too working class? Is it too outside the comfort zone, or was it just a rubbish pilot? I don't know, but The film did fairly well, as far as I know.
I think the film did extremely well. Was it not an Oscar-winning film?
Maybe.
Maybe I'm thinking. I think I might be thinking something else. What's someone with Casey Affleck?
That is Gone Baby Gone.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think it might have won an Oscar.
I'll have a quick look.
Okay.
So yeah, but I don't know. I just wonder. I mean, it makes me wonder. I'm just trying to find out about Gone Baby Gone.
I mean, we should like both you and I have alluded to. We can't. We haven't seen these shows, so there's every possibility that the reason that they were passed over was just because they were simply crap. Like, I mean, that could be the only reason that they got passed over. Yeah.
They were both nominated for awards for Gone Baby Gone. For Oscar, they were nominated Golden Globe, Screen Actors Guild. They're all nominated for all these, but I don't think they won. But it was very well received. But yeah, the TV show, no, sadly not. It did win some awards, to be fair, from looking at it. Filmmaker, Supporting Actress, Critic Awards. So that's not bad. Right, what's the next one have you got?
So this is one I think is probably the most genre thing that I saw on the list. There's a couple, but this is the thing that reminded me of shows like Lost and these sort of high concept, really quirky genre dramas.
Yeah.
And this is something called Manifest. I don't know if that's on your list.
No, but I did see it.
So this is, I'm going to read it quickly. So in this character-driven, so the main problem with it, I'm going to say, is it sounds a little bit like the 4400.
Yeah.
So basically this plane disappears off the radar and just completely goes missing. And then years later, the plane just reappears again. No time has passed for the people on the plane, but all of the other characters have moved on with their lives, and it's many years after that plane first went missing, which is... Again, on face value, it sounds like the plot of the 4400, which is where all these people got kidnapped by aliens and then just suddenly appeared years later. But at the same time, this is the show that reminds me of this could be something along the line of Lost. If done well, this could be something that's actually quite special and quite interesting. One of the executive producers is Robert Zemeckis, who has obviously got a great history in films. So it just seemed to me that maybe this has the potential of being something really interesting. This has the potential of being the new Lost, possibly.
Yeah. Possibly. Yeah. I don't know. The other genre-ish one that I saw that has been ordered to a series is based upon a novel. It's called The Passage.
It was on my list as well.
Right, so I've read the first book. This is based on a best-selling trilogy by Justin Cronin, and it's a sort of Walking Dead type thing, but in a vampire post-apocalyptic world, kind of. But it's somewhere between that and a road trip sort of thing, focusing on a guy trying to protect this 10-year-old girl, and it's almost got a bit of the I Am Legend, the new version, because they're hinting at the reason that has caused this vampire epidemic type thing is to do with scientific experimentation for immunoviruses that cause this weird side effect. So I think it's been redeveloped from reading around it, but it's now been picked up for a series, and there's a big cast, and we don't know much more about it yet, because there is a trailer actually on YouTube. You can watch it, and it looks interesting, but my fear is it's just going to become the new Walking Dead, which I dropped a while ago, because it just got so boring.
I'll tell you what it really reminded me of, which was... a movie based on, I think it was a comic. It was either a comic or a novel. Yeah, that was one of my favourite films over the last few years, but very, very few people have seen. But the instant I read this, it was like, this just sounds like a TV version of this movie, which is The Girl with All the Gifts.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if have you seen it or read it.
I've read the book, of course. Obviously. And it was filmed not far from where I live.
Oh, okay. That is interesting.
I'm looking forward to watching it and be able to pick out local spots now. But and I've also got the sequel, which is a prequel, actually, The Boy in the Bridge on my to-read pile.
Okay, that's cool. So just to talk about the passage a little bit. So, a character-driven thriller about a secret government medical facility experimenting with a dangerous virus that could either cure all disease or cause the downfall of the human race. The drama focuses on a 10-year-old girl named Amy who's chosen to be a test subject, and Brad Walgast, the federal agent who becomes her surrogate father. And that really resonates to me with the movie of The Girl with All the Gifts.
Yes.
And there was lots of bits to that sounded really familiar. So I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it was just it was like, this sounds like a TV version of that movie that I'll really like. So potentially this is something that could be quite cool.
Yeah. Right, any others?
Honestly, I had about 3 others on my list, but I'm probably scraping the bottom of the barrel a little bit with these ones. Again, it was. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head at the beginning. The best way to describe this list is safe.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. And some of these things are likely to be great, but there's very few things that are. We've talked about a few things here, but the list that you sent me was ginormous.
Yes.
So we've only talked about a relatively small percentage of the stuff on there, and most of it is sort of fairly boring, generic things that aren't that exciting. But maybe some of them will be great, and I hope they are. I hope they all are. But it remains to be seen, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I do like a cop police procedural. I'm watching a couple at the moment. But I know most of these shows, some of them will just be cut, some of them will just go on forever and they won't evolve because they're in that sort of 22, 24 episode cycle thing where they just keep stretching it out and it just becomes so thin. So I think The Rookie, given that it's also gone straight to series, will be my new police procedural that I'll invest time in and start watching. The rest, I don't know. I suspect 1 or 2 I might dip in and out of. But there's not many on this thing that have made me go, "Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I must watch that." Well, 1, The Rookie. Apart from that, I can't think of anything else.
And the thing with The Rookie is it just has the right quirk to it, right? So that's the thing. So every police procedural has to have the quirk. You've got Monk, or the guy that's the detective that has such terrible OCD, he just spots every little detail.
Yeah.
Or you have whatever. Every single police procedural has to have the quirk to hang it off, and that seems to be the one that has just the perfect quirk to be able to pull it off, and the perfect bit of casting to do it as well. So
yeah.
And like you say, straight to series. It was like no messing about.
It's Nathan Fillion. Come on.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So, have you seen this list? Are there any shows out there that you're really looking forward to that we haven't mentioned? We obviously hadn't touched on the comedies, but there's so many of them. And as I said, if they stay around long enough, they usually go through to Netflix or we get them on a UK channel. Because if they don't go on for more than a season, we just don't see them. It's just not worth it. They don't bother buying it, so we don't see them over here. So things like, The Good Place and Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Santa Clarita, we get to see them because they survive. So we'll see which of these comedies come through in a couple of years. We might be talking about them then, saying, "Oh, it's brilliant, it's really, really good," but I haven't bothered to scan the list yet. So what are you watching? What are you looking forward to? Let us know. You can come onto the Facebook group, look up for Grouchy Old Geeks. You can email us, grouchyoldgeeks@gmail.com, and don't forget to check out the Geek Syndicate website for your news and all of the other podcasts that are on the network. Right, that's it for this month. In the meantime, I guess I'll say it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
Good night.